Replaying Mortal Kombat X in 2026 honestly feels like uncovering a time capsule from the most 2010s era of gaming imaginable. This game has everything: grey military filters, dubstep menu music, characters speaking entirely in one-liners, and an ancient elder god getting beaten up by Johnny Cage's daughter. And the weird thing is, MKX is still ridiculously fun, because underneath all the edgy, random chaos and absurd story decisions, this game somehow become one of the most memorable Mortal Kombat games NetherRealm has ever made. Going back to it now, it honestly feels surreal, because you can literally feel NetherRealm trying to turn Mortal Kombat into this massive cinematic AAA franchise in real time. Everything is louder, darker, more dramatic, and somehow everybody in this universe suddenly has a dysfunctional family. But at the same time, this is also the game that gave us some genuinely amazing character designs, still one of the most entertaining story modes in the series, and a roster people still argue about to this day. So after 11 years, I wanted to go back and revisit Mortal Kombat X to see if it actually still holds up, or if we're just all blinded by nostalgia. Replaying this game now was honestly kind of a weird experience, because this game feels so mid-2010s in the best and worst ways possible. The very first thing I noticed coming back to it was just how dark everything is, and I don't mean tonally, I mean visually. Every stage looks like it's covered in permanent grey filter. The whole game is just gloomy, ultra serious looking, to like they were terrified of sunlight existing. But weirdly enough, it still kind of works for MKX specifically. The darker aesthetic makes the game feel more brutal compared to MK9, even if some character designs definitely aged better than others. Like Johnny and Sonya still look great, Scorpion still looks amazing, Kotal Khan honestly might have the best look he's ever had in this game. Then you've got characters like Sub-Zero, where I still can't decide if I like the design or not, and Jax genuinely looks about 15% away from becoming a Transformer. And then there's Quan Chi, who looks like Mark Strong cosplaying Kratos. Gameplay wise though, the story mode is ridiculously entertaining, because it constantly throws different characters at you. One minute you're playing Johnny Cage, then suddenly you're Sub-Zero, then Kotal, then Scorpion. So even if one character doesn't click with you, the game moves on fast enough that it never really gets boring. And some characters still feel incredible to use, Sub-Zero especially ridiculously smooth. Scorpion still feels borderline overpowered, and Jax hits like he's trying to punch me through the screen. Then there are characters like Jackie, where something about her gameplay just never fully clicked for me. The pacing during the fights is honestly one of the campaign's biggest strengths. Some moments are insanely hype, replaying them now. Fighting multiple opponents back to back as Sub-Zero was cool. The Reptile QTE section was surprisingly sick with Takeda, and beating the life out of Quan Chi during the story moments with the QTEs with Sonya was weirdly satisfying after listening to him manipulate everybody for hours. That being said, the game's absolutely random in its difficulty spikes. They feel completely insane. Most fights are manageable, and then suddenly Liu Kang starts pummeling you. The fight genuinely feels like playing online, and they already know your inputs before you even do. And Ermac was somehow even worse. I think that was the first fight where I genuinely had to lock in. Then eventually, you get to Corrupted Shinnok, who honestly still one of the coolest boss designs of NetherRealm. The giant corrupted elder god is so over the top that it loops back round to being sick. Honestly, that kind of sums up MKX as a whole. Everything about this game is excessive, designs are edgy, the story is dramatic, the fights are chaotic, and the story is pure chaos. Speaking of the story, going back to Mortal Kombat X's story now is honestly hilarious, because this is the exact moment the series stopped being a fighting tournament and became a full-on supernatural military drama. MK9 already rebooted the timeline and killed off like half of the characters, so MKX opens with Earthrealm basically fighting demon zombies with an actual war against Shinnok. And immediately the game throws you into complete chaos. Liu Kang and Katana, evil revenants now, Raiden's trying to save the universe again, and Johnny Cage, the guy who's never serious, is somehow now one of Earthrealm's most important protectors. What makes Mortal Kombat X stand out though is the tone. One second you've got demons and sorcery, then suddenly feels like a 2010s military movie with helicopters, tactical briefings and special forces soldiers everywhere. It's ridiculous, but the game commits it so hard that it somehow works. So the actual opening chapter is basically Earthrealm's last stand against Shinnok after the events of MK9. Raiden leads the heroes into the Netherrealm to stop him, while all the dead characters from the previous game come back as evil slaves working for Quan Chi. And honestly, the Revenant versions of these characters are weirdly funny because they all act permanently irritated, especially Liu Kang, who spends this entire game sounding like he absolutely hates being here. But the biggest surprise is Johnny Cage somehow becoming the MVP of the entire war. During the final fight, he unlocks his now iconic energy powers that lets him beat Shinnok. Which is funny because up until this point, Johnny was basically just a comic relief. The game suddenly reveals the Cage bloodline has magic anti-god powers because apparently the writers needed a reason for Johnny not to die instantly. And honestly, it's dumb, but it's the exact kind of dumb Mortal Kombat is. After Shinnok gets sealed away in his own amulet, everybody acts like the problem is solved, which Mortal Kombat logic usually means things are about to become infinitely worse. After that, the game jumps forward 20-ish years, and suddenly turns into the next generation territory. Now the focus is on Cassie Cage, Jackie Briggs, Takeda, and Kung Jin, pretty much the Mortal Kombat Young Avengers. And to be fair, some of them are actually pretty likeable. Cassie especially ends up carrying a huge part of the story because she has Johnny's sarcasm, without being completely unbearable. But it's also really obvious NetherRealm wanted these characters to become the new faces of the series, while also knowing everybody still mainly cared about the main cash cows. So the game constantly bounces between here are the new heroes and okay, back to the ninja rivalry everyone pays attention to. Meanwhile, Outworld is a disaster because Shao Kahn died, Kotal Kahn took control, but Melina starts a rebellion because apparently nobody in Mortal Kombat has ever accepted losing an election peacefully. Typical politicians. So now Earthrealm has to deal with the demonic magic, undead assassins, and Outworld politics simultaneously. At a certain point you realise Quan Chi is basically responsible for every bad thing that happens in this timeline. The guy is fighting for his life trying to stay relevant, he controls the Revenants, manipulates Shinnok's return, lies to Scorpion, and somehow still has time to stand around smirking at every cutscene. Then there's Devourer, who might honestly be the biggest snake in the entire franchise. Melina, Kotal Kahn, Quan Chi, they all trust her, and then they all get betrayed. Devourer survives purely by switching teams every time she's on the screen. Most of the plot revolves around everyone fighting over this magic amulet because that can free the big bad Shinnok. And naturally, every faction has Butterfingers and loses control of it at least once. It really does feel like the entire story is just different groups accidentally helping the villains for 4 hours straight. But the best part comes when Scorpion finally learns Quan Chi is the one who framed the original Sub-Zero all along, which should have been this huge emotional breakthrough, except Scorpion immediately responds in the most Scorpion way possible: murder. So after decades of hating Sub-Zero, Scorpion finally learns Quan Chi manipulated him the entire time, and destroyed his life for no reason except to be evil. And for 1 second, it actually feels like the reboot timeline is building towards something meaningful. Scorpion and Sub-Zero finally make peace, Hanzo starts acting like an actual human being, and it seems like maybe things are calming down. Then Scorpion immediately kills Quan Chi anyway in the most brutal way possible, which would normally be fine, except Quan Chi was literally the only thing keeping Shinnok trapped. The second he dies, Shinnok comes back stronger than ever, starts corrupting Earthrealm almost instantly. Raiden gets folded, the heroes start panicking, and suddenly Cassie Cage has to save reality because the Cage family are apparently secret Elder God killers now. And honestly, the final fight is one of the funniest things in Mortal Kombat lore, because this ancient evil god who's existed for thousands of years loses to Johnny Cage's daughter, but somehow the game sells it anyway. Cassie defeats Shinnok, Earthrealm survives, and the story ends teasing Dark Raiden, which looked insanely cool at the time before Mortal Kombat 11 retcons it. And honestly, that kind of MKX in general. The story is messy, overdramatic, and completely ridiculous, but it's also incredibly entertaining from start to end. Looking back now, MKX's story honestly feels like the exact moment NetherRealm figured out what their modern story formula was going to be. It's fast, it constantly throws characters at you, and barely gives you time to question how silly it all is before another fight kicks off. And yeah, the plot is completely insane when you break it down. Half the cast dies, comes back evil, everybody gets manipulated, and somehow Earthrealm is saved by Johnny Cage's daughter having his powers this whole time. But at the same time, it's probably one of the most entertaining Mortal Kombat stories because the pacing never slows down. There's always some betrayal, another realm collapsing, or Scorpion making the worst possible decision. It's messy, it's the kind of messy that makes Mortal Kombat what it is today. 11 years on and MKX is still the most aggressively 2010s edgy action movie this series has ever been. Trying to play this game online in 2026 was honestly kind of depressing. For a game that people still talk about to this day, the online feels almost completely abandoned by now. I spent nearly 10 minutes searching through different modes just trying to find anybody willing to fight, and when I finally did match with someone, I'm pretty sure they were playing from another realm because the game disconnected before the match even started. And honestly, it's weird because MKX still has a pretty passionate community, because people still praise the gameplay and argue about the roster, but actually trying to find a match feels like that one John Travolta meme, which is a shame too because the game was clearly built around being competitive. The movement is fast, the combos are flashy, and every character feels like they were designed to make someone crash out at least once. And then there's the crit. I'll be honest, I got bored almost instantly. To be fair, I completely understand why people loved this mode back in the day. It gave the game personality, there was tons of unlockable secrets everywhere, callbacks for OG fans. But it was basically Mortal Kombat making an interactive extras menu. But revisiting it now, the first person movement felt weirdly clunky. The camera genuinely started making me feel motion sick after a while, and eventually I basically just kept opening chests until my coins from story mode ran out, which honestly feels like the usual crypt experience anyway. I only ended up doing one classic tower run with Scorpion because honestly it was enough to immediately hit me with nostalgia from 2015. Before Mortal Kombat 11 come out, MKX was basically the Mortal Kombat game for 4 straight years. And because of that, I played the towers an unhealthy amount of time back then. So revisiting it now feels weirdly comforting. The actual structure is still simple, but it worked. Pick a character, fight your way through an increasingly annoying opponent, watch someone get brutally dismembered by the end, and then get rewarded with an alternate ending that may or may not have completely destroyed the game's main story. And honestly, I still love these tower endings. They're cheesy and completely insane, but they give every character a bit more personality outside the main story. Half the fun was beating a tower just to see what absurd what-if scenario the character had. The live towers definitely aren't what they used to be though. Back in MKX's prime, those rotating towers actually gave the game this feeling there was always something happening when you logged on. More content to experience. Now it's just quiet. But to be fair, support slowing down is completely expected at this point, considering there's been 2 entire Mortal Kombat games released since then. Still, even replay on one tower run was enough to remind me how much time we all used to sink into this game. So after going back and replaying Mortal Kombat X over a decade later, I honestly get why so many people still defended this game so hard. Yeah, parts of it aged weirdly, the online is basically a wasteland now, and the game looks like somebody poured a grey filter over the entire screen. And some of the story decisions still feel completely insane, even by Mortal Kombat standards. But at the same time, this game still has a weird amount of charm. The gameplay is fast, satisfying, roster is memorable, the story mode is completely ridiculous in the most entertaining way possible, and MKX still has this super specific identity that none of the newer games really replicated. It genuinely feels like NetherRealm at their most experimental. They were trying darker visuals, more cinematic storytelling, faster gameplay, horror-inspired designs. And even when it didn't fully work, the game was never boring. And honestly, I think that that's why people talk about MKX still to this day the way they do. Not because it was perfect, but because it had personality. You can criticise the balancing, the roster choices, the writing, or even the endless amounts of family drama in the story. But you'll never confuse MKX with any other fighting game from that era. But somehow that's exactly why replaying it in 2026 was still so much fun. And honestly, I'll probably still be replaying this game another 10 years from now. If you enjoyed the video, please like, comment, subscribe, and let me know your favourite Mortal Kombat game. Thank you.